All right, for a special limited edition small batch Vape Nation lecture, we're going for week 5, day 1, part 3. That's right, you heard it right. Part 3. Get pumped for this part 3. Yeah, fist in the air, right? All right. And so if you're watching these sequentially, part 1, part 2, part 3, um, you're probably ready to just jump right in. But here in-house, I just want to do a quick recap. We got all of our models created. We got the user, we got the tweet, we have our create, read, update, and delete endpoints all created. Well, not update, but we have all our CRUD functionality available through API. Really what we need to do now is we need to lock it down with some logical security. And I keep calling it logical security because it's something that can be solved with a programming solution. It's not, like security where you just need to get a bigger hard drive and put it behind a firewall or a load balancer or encryption with an SSL key or something. You don't need any of that. It's logical security. So we can make it. Typically with logical security, though, we are at fault if we screw it up. With cryptography type security, it's not usually your fault. And if it is, it's probably some form of negligence. Logical security is just we just did it wrong, we programmed it wrong, and somebody was able to access somebody else's stuff. And these kinds of things happen a lot in the real world. I found it on an app that I was a consumer of. That the URL said, it was like resource slash 1 or resource slash 5, and I saw that I was able to see 5, and so I was like, let's just type in resource slash 10. And it said, like, owner, John Smith, definitely not me. I'm like, oh, okay. Then that means that's not good. So I contacted the site administrator. They had it fixed that afternoon. That's usually a really easy thing, but it tends to kind of fly under the radar in some cases if somebody's getting a feature out. So let's work on locking these things down. So let's jump into Atom and let's see where we are at. So in our views, just very basic, completely open, create, read, update, and delete views. Now, before we completely lock it down, we want to make sure that we have our logical stuff in there. And so the way that I can illustrate that is that if I don't pass the author to my tweet, so for example, in Postman, if I just say, this is a new tweet, if I don't pass the author, it'll say that I am required to send over an author. Well, that's not great because I don't want to be able to, I don't want to accept the author from the front end, which is the typical use case when you're creating data. Take the data from the front end, create it on the back end. But in this case, we don't want to do that. So what I want to do is I want to make it so that the author is not required from the front end, but I will provide it from the back end. So the way that I'll do that is there's a method that you can hook into inside of Django REST list create API view. Actually, anything that implements a create API view, like the list create or just a create, you can hook into this method. The method is called perform create. And we already saw this once in the, what was it called? The Jonas or whatever it was called, the something source code, the Joran, Joser.
I didn't know what you were trying to say.
I was way off.
Jonas.
The Jonas, the Joran. We saw that when we were looking in the Joser source code, and that takes 2 arguments. It takes the instance itself, and it also takes the serializer. And the serializer is going to be the data that's coming in. Okay, there's a little bit more information on perform create. This right here, I can link you to this if we need to, but really we don't need to come back to this. It says save and deletion hooks. That means that a hook is typically a method that exists that we don't want to re-implement the post method for the create. Like that would be a lot of bad work, and we'd probably screw something up, creating many more logical errors in the process. But what we want to do is we just want to add a tiny little bit of functionality. We want to say, I want to do this thing, but I don't want to screw up the whole flow. I want to add to it. So there's a perform create hook that we can use that will say, okay, you want to add a little bit, just put it into this method. And then the request response lifecycle will retain intact, but the perform create will just add a little bit more that you can do in its place. And so what we want to do, and it looks like we're not returning from the perform create, So it looks like that has a return of none. But what we want to do is we want to add, well, you know what? There's actually an instance in here where it says that these hooks are particularly useful for setting attributes that are implicit in the request, but are not part of the request data. Can you all think of anything that's implicit in the request but not part of the data? The person who is wanting to create it. So for instance, you might want to set an attribute on the object based on the request user, or based on a URL keyword argument. I would rather not use the URL keyword argument. I would like to use the request user, because that's really good info. So I'm going to set the serializer.save, and I want to pass. Now we need to make sure that, so in the documentation it says user is equal to self.request.user, but in our case it's not called user. So on the tweet, what was the name of the field that contained the user? The author, correct. The author is the foreign key to the user. So we need to make sure that we are saying author is equal to self.request.user. Okay, you ready? Now let's try to do that exact same request here, where we sent over a body but no author. Let's see what happens now. Still says the field is required. Okay, I have some ideas of why that might happen, and that's why I'm here. Because right now, you're probably just like, I have no idea what's going on right now. So what's happening here is that our serializer is saying, I'm expecting this here. So let's take that out and see what happens. Let's take that field out and just say, send it over. Okay, well, we got a big error. That's a 500 internal server error, meaning something went wrong and I don't know what happened. In fact, this is exactly what I was hoping would happen. So if you saw that error and you had that immediate, like, I did something wrong, I feel like a bad person response, let it go. Just like Elsa, right? We're going to let it go. Because I expected this to happen. This is saying that it cannot assign anonymous user to tweet author. Okay, anonymous user. What is that anonymous user sort of clicking in your head? Why is there an anonymous user and not a logged in user? There's no token being passed in. Okay, so let's go to our headers. We have a token here. I honestly don't remember who that is. But let's turn that authorization header on, and now let's send it over. Let's re-click the send button. And there we go.
What if we want to show the author?
What if we want to show the author? Great question. So let's see how we can do that. Inside of a serializer, you define these fields in this list here. But you can also define fields up top here like you do on a model. So like in that little gray area between methods and whatnot, like you can define fields just like you do in a model. So let's take, for example, I want to create a field that is not going to be expected to income data, but it's going to output data, or input data. So let's go to serializers. Let's go to serializer fields. What I'm looking for is a read-only field. So you have field class that simply returns the value of a field without modification. This field is used by default with model serializer when including a field names that relate to an attribute rather than a model field. So for example, if it has expired was a property on the account model. Okay, what am I doing here? No, that's what we want. That's what this is a bad example. But let's go ahead and set up here. What's the name of our author? It's author, right? So if I say author is equal to, oh crap, you know what? I did this import wrong. All right, let's just not spend the time to fix it. Let's just say from REST framework import serializers. The same way that models is imported. So from REST framework import serializers. I'm going to say I think it's serializers dot read only field. So that's saying that there's going to be a field called author, and we want it to be a read-only field. Let's see if that worked. This part I'm always like a little bit, maybe it'll work, maybe it won't work. I'm going to switch my data to be a get. We'll leave our authorization header on there. Doesn't really matter. Let's do a send. The field author is declared on serial, tweet serial, but none has been included in the fields option. Okay. So that must mean that we need to add it back into our fields here, because now we have declared it as a field. And I'm hoping that, my hope is that since it's a read-only field, it won't try to set it in the validation step before it gets to our perform create. Let's try to do it again. Nothing is going right. User, object of type user is not JSON serializable. Wasn't expecting that one. Give me a second here. I wasn't expecting that to error on me. Let's take a look at serializer relations. A string-related field. No, that's not what we want to do. All of these are not what we want to do. We want to go back. Do we want to use a model field, I think is the... No, that's not what we want to do. See, serializer method field is usually the really easy way to do it, but I don't want to use that. Let's say Django REST framework. Now I'm asking Google what's going on here. Say Django REST framework, add user to serializer. But I also want to get it out. So because typically what I do is at this point I usually just table flip and use the serializer method field. We'll save that as our ejector seat. I can't find a more elegant solution here. Yeah, that's not what I want to do. None of these are what I want to do at all. Add user to serializer, or add user to model serializer. Here we go, specifying read only. Oh, was it really that? Was it really that? Oh my gosh, this is where, okay, cool. Let me make sure that we can get to this right. So we have, I knew there was a freaking read only fields. Read only fields. All right, give me a second. We got this. Your read only fields includes the author. That should now do something. Yep. Sorry about that. I knew we had to do a read-only field. I forgot there was a read-only fields thing on the class meta. So this is how you define extra, or you give more information to individual fields on your serializer. It can become difficult with a model serializer, though, because it does way more work. So all we really only had to do was add keep the field on fields here, but specify it as a read-only field.
So why would we need to put ID in a read-only field? Because we're not manually putting in what the ID is going to be either.
I think because those are set as read-only fields on the model. So we wouldn't be able to create a model with an ID. We wouldn't be able to pass it a created either. So anything that's a read-only field on the model will automatically become a read-only field here. But we still want to read it. And then here we just add in author here. Sweet. We can't.
Postman still not showing the.
Postman won't let you create it.
Well, I tried to create it again. It still doesn't show the author. So,
You have to add the author back into the list of fields. So let's see if we can now create again. Let's go back to post. Let's set the body to let the body hit the door. Let's set its author. Well, we're not going to set the author, right? So let's go. It did not error when I tried to create it. I didn't pass over the author. We say get, and there we go. All right, so now we have related data here to a user. I need to use the restroom.
Yeah, so I just put an overlay on the video that says BRB, so you can just mouse over it through the slider and see where the preview of the BRB stops. watch it reminded everybody there's a hot microphone on that thing.
Oh shit.
Well, we shouldn't have talked all that crap. I always forget. Hot mic. All right. Hot mic is my programmer nickname. Come on. I had to. Okay, so that was actually it with Perform Create. And believe it or not, the whole Perform Create serializer save get the user is that's most of like logical complexity when you create data. So for example, for tonight's homework assignment, probably going to be like assigned to you at 4 o'clock at this point. But for tonight's homework assignment, and if that is, I'll give you extra time. Don't worry about it. For tonight's homework assignment, you are going to create like an action, like a calculator action, and it has to be tied to a logged in user. So it's pretty similar to what we're doing here, but the model structure is going to be a little bit different, and then the data that's returned is going to be a little bit different because it's, well, I mean, I guess not. The data return is just going to show you the model. So you are going to probably want to calculate. Do we want to do that? I'll have to think about that. Yeah, no, we'll be fine with that. The last thing I want to show you, sorry, my brain's sort of all over the place. It was a crazy weekend. The last thing I want to show you today is how to lock down so that other people don't delete other people's tweets. So this is a permissions thing, and fortunately, this is also within. It's such a common thing that it's inside of Django REST's documentation here. So we click on permissions, and we look at custom permissions. There's an example custom permission here that used to be in here. There it is. It's called is owner or read only. And this is great because you can copy and paste it, and it's like almost the exact same thing. You get my permission to copy and paste it and put it into your project. So at 140, Joel says that you can copy and paste this URL up here, which, by the way, if you're watching the video, pause it right now. It's like go over there and hit the pause button. It's got the 2 vertical bars. Get that URL right there, because that hash custom permissions, and then scroll down a little bit to where it says is owner or read only. You get that. We are going to copy that. And we are going to put that into our own new file inside of our app directory called permissions.py. So go ahead and make a new file in your app, call it permissions.py. And we just need, all we need to do is import permissions now. I believe that's from REST framework, import permissions. So if we just look at what's going on with this permission, this is set for the first line one says if the request.method is in safe methods. Now that's set like basically get or options or head. So if it's in get, or if the request is get, meaning I want to look at the detail of this object, this will say yes, you have the permission to see it. Otherwise, it's going to look to see if the obj.owner is double equal to the request.user. Now, this is wrong. If you stopped the video where I said you can copy paste this, copied and pasted it, and went on with your life, you fell for the trap. The trap is that our object is a tweet, and there is no field called owner there. So we need to change that to the user field. We need to change that to our author field. So that's basically, it's returning a Boolean either way that says it's either true if it's a GET request. So all GET requests can come in to this permission. And what a true means is that it's going to pass through. So all of the permissions basically return a true or a false. And if the permission resolves to true, it will let you through to the view. If it resolves to a false, it will stop you right there. So this is saying, I'm requesting an object. Is that object's.author equal to me? Now, everything other than a get, basically, is going to use that second one. which says that, are you the creator of this thing? All right, so now with that out of the way, we can apply this permission to our view. And we do that with something called permission classes. Not there, right there. So there's a thing that you can add into that little gray area of the view that you can specify permission classes, just like we have serializer class and query set. We can say permission classes, and we're going to give it a list. And we need to import that. So we say from app.permissions, import. We called it isOwner or read only. Well, we didn't call it that. We just copied and pasted it. I honestly don't know why. Like, it would be nice if this was built into Django REST, but I understand why it's not. And then in those permission classes, we just say isOwner or read only down here on tweet, retrieve, destroy API view. Now, here's a real curveball question. This question is not immediately related to what we're working on, but this is a side question. It's sort of thinking of the why do we do things like this? Why do you think we defined the permission into its own file and not directly right here onto this retrieve destroy API view? What does your brain tell you? So we can use it other places. Exactly. That's exactly why we do it. So that if I wanted to use that isOwner or read only, maybe in a completely other different model, like maybe it doesn't make sense as a different model because it has to have an author field on it. But if that model did have an author field, that's the owner of it. Or we can probably even change the name of this to isAuthor or read only. And then we can make a bunch of is blank or read only. And then we can make those to be whatever we want to. But so this technically should say isAuthor or read only, but we'll let it pass. So what that means is, let's see if this works now. So if I do this get here, now another thing to mention too is that my authorization header that's set is for ID of 2. So let's say that we have a tweet ID of 4, and I want to do a delete to that. That should let me do that, right? Because if my authorization token is for ID of 2, meaning this author right here, I should be able to delete tweet number 4. I should not, however, be able to delete tweet number 1. Correct? Okay, so let's try to send that over. You can follow along if you want. I'm going to click delete for tweet number 4 as user number 2. Okay. Okay, we got an error. What's the error here? Oh, there's no slash at the end of tweet/4. Okay, we got a 204 no content. That's good. So when we do a /tweets get, we should see number 4 is not there anymore. Perfect. Now let's try that again, but let's try to delete tweet number 1. Say delete to tweet number 1 as user number 2. This should fail. You do not have permission to perform this action. Isn't that great? It gives you a detailed error message so that you can even show that to the user. Like, you can take that error message, show it in the CLI, just print it out. Or you can put it somewhere on the web page in red text. Say, I don't even have to internalize what that is. It just says, you do not have permission. And furthermore, look at that status code. 403 forbidden. The request was a legal request, but the server is refusing to respond to it. Unlike a 401 unauthorized response, authenticating will make no difference. That's something interesting. I always thought a 401 would come back from something like that. But that's saying that even though you're logged in, like you are logged in, the problem here is deeper than you logging in. You're trying to delete one of Donald Trump's tweets when you're logged in as Joel Taddy. Wait, I shouldn't have used my name. When you're logged in as John Smith. So yeah, I'm sorry. I half-heartedly now apologize for dragging this out for so long because it winds up being a 3-line change here with a couple of things just copied and pasted. But I really wanted to make sure I explained it, maybe over-explained it, because this is a really heady topic when it comes to what you're accomplishing, and it's gonna seem like your intuition is probably going to put you into the mindset that, okay, tonight's calculator, Joel wants me to extend myself, to really stretch out my programming. So it's probably going to be a little bit more than that. And it really isn't. Like, I'm looking for kind of a reiteration of what we did today, with the training wheels a little bit off. Like, I want you to repeat with as little hand holding as possible to see what you retained today, to see if you are able to dig yourself out of any holes, but using this video and me as a safety net. I don't want you to misinterpret what I just said as I don't want you to ask for help. I want you to ask for help still. But I just want you to sort of step a little bit more outside of your comfort zone, because we are getting to be about almost halfway done. If you don't count final projects, we're pretty much halfway done. So you're going to want to start getting to the point where force yourself outside of that safety area. And if it's uncomfortable, if you can't do it, put yourself back in there. That's going to be like these little micro challenges that you're going to give to yourself, so that by the time you're done and out of here, you'll feel comfortable stepping in, well, more comfortable than you would be if you didn't, stepping into that first job and being able to deal with those challenges that you're not going to put on yourself, but other people will put on you. Okay? All right. Well, that was a lot to cover in one day, and I understand if your brain is just kind of melted. That's why I've made sure that today's videos were good. But I'm going to go ahead and put your homework online now. It's the API calculator. On a high level, really, all I want you to do is send over 3 attributes: operand 1, operand 2, and operator. Operand just means what's on each side of the plus or minus symbol, and the operator is the plus or minus symbol. And what you're going to do is you're going to create those as a math operation, and you're going to do that math, and you're going to set it on the model. You might have to do that math in something like a perform create here, because you have the user, which you're going to be doing a perform create anyway, but that total, you're not going to be able to send over the total. The total has to kind of set itself, just as the user has to set itself here on the back end. So there is a little bit of a challenge, but you should not be doing anything outside of the perform create. At least, and if you do, and you get it to work, that's fine. I'd like to see how you did it, see where your brain took you. But my intention is for all of the work to be done inside of a perform create. All right? I can think of probably 6 different ways of doing this off the top of my head that if you looked online, you had a different idea, you could probably find a bunch of different ways. But this is the best way to get started. All right, I'm going to go ahead and turn the recording off now and let you all get back to work. And I'm going to put your homework actually in there so you can get started. But if you want to get started creating your Django application, all that stuff, you can go right ahead with it. All right? Cool. Dunsies.